Good morning, gorgeous. So, this video is going to be a brief thing on how to get started in homeschool or what to do this year in homeschool. Heck, it's just what do I do in homeschool? That's probably the most accurate title for it. Over the years, several people have asked me basically for some light mentoring when they're new to homeschooling, whether they've already made the leap and are at home from public school and they're like, what do we do now? Or maybe their kids are little and they're thinking about the future. And so I tend to tell them the same kind of basic things. But I want to preface all this, of course, with this is just how I've done homeschool. There are so many ways to do homeschool, and the more families that you meet that are homeschooling, the more you can really appreciate how it takes on so many different faces and formats, and you can do it, is basically the message that I want to convey. I think the public education system and the governments and heck even mainstream media have done a bang-up job convincing parents that they aren't qualified to teach their own children. And I really feel like this is something that should be debunked up front. They're your children, you raised them, you taught them everything that they know before they entered school, which included speech, personal hygiene to some degree or another. You taught them how to take care of their things, so you taught them to take care of you and of them. You probably taught them how to read and even some basics of how to write and color. There's a lot that goes into just pre-K and raising an infant and a toddler and a preschooler. So my point is that education is simply communication with a purpose towards enriching the person in front of you. And I really feel strongly that that purpose isn't necessarily always being fulfilled in our public schools. So if you can communicate with your kid, if you like your kid, if your kid is willing to hear your communication and be tolerant and cooperative with you, then homeschooling is great. I guess as a side note to that, if your kid's in rebellion, it still could work. It could be just maybe they're not rebelling against you. Maybe you're all rebelling and having a war over the fact of public schooling, and they just need a freaking break. So, step one, if you're coming out of public school, my recommendation is take at least 2 weeks off to just let the kid decompress and let yourself find your footing. Let yourself and your kid meet each other. Who you are at home, you probably are aware of this, especially if you have been in the workplace at any point in your life. Who you are at home is very different than who you are in your work environment. And so your kid has had to come up with ways of surviving that environment that probably aren't especially conducive to thriving at home. So you gotta give them a sec, to transition and feel safe and not threatened, especially not threatened by you. I feel like the success of homeschool really hinges on an old-fashioned sensibility for family and team working together, and I think our high-speed culture, our merit-driven culture sometimes loses sight of that and puts so much emphasis on making good grades and getting it right that we forget the basic idea of being there and just being there and communicating and helping each other get through something as friends. And if you want your kids to grow up and be a good friend, homeschooling is a really great way to model that, because it's your opportunity to assist someone on a very personal, individual level to get what they need to survive in life. And that's a really beautiful thing to model to your kids. Okay, so that's kind of the pep talk, the underlying purposes of why I think homeschooling is great and why I think that you are singularly qualified to teach your own children is because they're your children. You know them. So what do you need to get started? Well, you need some time and you need some space. So I am very, very blessed to be an at-home mom. This is not by accident, it's by careful design. Even in the courtship phase of my marriage, I made it clear that this is what I wanted. And my husband was delighted because he really wanted someone at home with the kids. We had very different upbringings. His parents were largely absent from his life, and it was meaningful for him that his children wouldn't have to suffer that same loneliness. My parents were both very present in my life. My dad was the breadwinner, and my mom was a homemaker for most of the time. She did have part-time jobs by the time I was in high school, but she was always very available to us, and that made a big difference. And I knew by the time that I was 5 that I wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and an artist, and so homeschooling was very natural for us. Homeschooling was something that we planned before the beginning. So my oldest is 14 years old, and so neither one of my kids, 14 and 8 years old, have ever set foot in a public school, unless it's to pick up a friend. If we sometimes say, yeah, we'll pick her up from school, then they'll catch a glimpse. But they're very happy. They do have friends who do go to public school, and a great social life. That's another myth. Don't worry about the social life. As long as you're willing to get up and get out of the house and take them somewhere, they'll have a social life. So what was I rambling about? Things to know. What do you do first? What do you need? Well, you might notice in the background I have books. Now, this isn't required. This is a private love. I freaking love me some books. I love history. I love research. I'm an author. I'm a writer, so I'm always getting into things, learning things, and this has been a lifelong passion. My Uncle Kip gave me a dictionary for my 5th birthday, and I just laid in the floor and read it. And then they had to get me another dictionary. So this is just me. I love books. And then I organized them for the first time with those tabs this past summer, summer of 2016. I grouped them together so that my family could also use my book collection, because they were just all helter-skelter in there for a while. So that's really useful, because I've curated this library for myself, for my own enjoyment, but I've also curated things in there for my kids over the years. Anytime I go to a junk store or a garage sale, used bookstore, something like that, I'll keep an eye out for reference books that I think are really quality for youngsters. I also have, let's just go for a little walk. Okay, so up here on the top shelf, I've accumulated flashcards. We've got a box of phonics flashcards and games, and then we have math flashcards and manipulatives. You can buy these things at a teacher store. These are useful. It turns out the math program that I started using in this past year has something like that. So you might want to hold off on buying those. They might be incorporated in a program that you can purchase. What else is back there? We have a microscope, but we don't ever use it. We're just, not yet. We probably will. We hope to. And so we made darn sure that we didn't go drop $300 or $400 on it. We got that on Craigslist for, I think, $50, and it's from a university student. Hopefully they didn't rob the laboratory. Hopefully it actually belonged to them. I think the most important thing that you need to be a great home educator is your favorite warm beverage, your pajamas, and a very self-forgiving, self-loving attitude, because part and parcel to being in charge of your own school is the sense that you're screwing it up. And that's whether you've come out of public school or whether you're starting from scratch. Anytime you don't really have an administrative structure to pat you on the head and tell you when you're doing it right, or tell you when you're screwing it up, you tend to feel mostly that you're screwing it up. And you should just kind of check that off the to-do list and not worry about it. Don't focus on it. Don't grant it power, because what you're doing is a really tremendous gift to your family, not just to your kids, but to the whole family. It's really magical, the relationships and life lessons that home educators have whenever they just don't sweat that. Don't worry about screwing it up, because the thing is you're not doing public school. That's the point. You're doing homeschool, and there's so many ways to do homeschooling. It's like art. You can't really screw it up unless you do nothing at all to see to it or verify or acknowledge or jot it down that your kids are learning something. Because kids are constantly learning. It's what they're learning that you're trying to guide, like the walls of a river. You know, the kids, they run off. They go every damn where. and they're going to read every damn thing, and they're going to see everything, and they're going to talk to people, so they will be learning something. You are simply stepping in to be a guardian and a guide and say, this is what's needed. These are unnecessary. This knowledge is destructive, or if you're going to say that, if you're going to say a certain set of knowledge is destructive, you need to be prepared with really sensible reasons as to why you feel that way, so that your kid doesn't just roll their eyes and blow you off and go run right off into the ditch. So you start off with space and time. If you're making a switch, if you're just getting started, well, that's kind of built into how you can do homeschooling. A key question is like scheduling. What's an average day like? Again, that's going to vary family to family, and in my family it even varies a little bit by season. What we found probably by my eldest son's 7th year of age, so probably around 1st grade, 2nd grade, we realized that we really suck at schedules, right? The whole wake up at 8, breakfast by 8:30, start school by 9, that doesn't really work for us. I'm artsy fartsy, he's artsy fartsy. We're sometimes heavy on the fartsy and obsessive about the artsy, and so schedules don't do so well in our house, but we do thrive with a routine. So the difference between a schedule and a routine is the schedule is oriented to time markers, like the bell rings at school or something. Some families really do thrive on that. The predictability of that can be a real lifesaver. My family just doesn't. We like a routine. So our routine sounds like after breakfast, start with math. And then after math, do some language arts. And then take a 15-minute break to run outside and scream, and then come back in and do a half hour of this, that, or the other. So it's really just kind of setting down an agreement of sequence more than time marks. Then, oh yeah, another thing to realize is don't freak out over, are you a good teacher? You got plenty more to freak out about than just that question. You're not just a teacher, you're an administrator, so you've got to be a record keeper. It's important to note attendance. It's important to note how much time they spent on a certain subject, or what was accomplished. Have some periodic tests, like in your whatever you decide to get for math. Usually a math curriculum will come with a test, so make sure you jot it down when they take a test, and jot it down how well they did on the test. Things like that. So you've got some record keeping. That's your administrator hat. And then you've got to be the principal or the headmaster or headmistress. So there's a discipline hat that really needs to be distinct from your parenting, your mother, the way you mother or father your child. There needs to be a little degree of separation on how you just do kind of nurturing and child rearing versus how you do discipline for things like skipping assignments, or just not getting out of bed and showing up for school. So it's important to have a system in place that's an objective system, that's not just your rage and their failure to clash. Come up with a system. I'll do videos on each of these segments. This is just kind of an overview. So you're a teacher, you're an administrator, you are a headmaster or headmistress. Then you also get to be the cafeteria lady. You gotta have a plan to feed these people. If you're together all the dang time and you're teaching and jotting things down, you're gonna look up and decide and realize that the reason that someone is passed out on their desk or fallen out of the chair or is railing at you is they're starving because you didn't feed them. This is my chronic failing. I'm like, I fed you yesterday. So I have to work at being a good cafeteria lady. I have to have a plan, and I have to have a flow, a workflow happening in the kitchen at the same time that I'm a teacher and an administrator and occasionally a headmistress. Then you get to be the bus driver and the social director, because these kids got to meet some other kids or you will lose your mind. You need to meet some other grown-ups who are doing what you're doing, so that you're not surrounded by people who are second-guessing what you're doing and going, well, what grade are they in? Well, that's a foggy question. So be sure that you attend to the social life, because it's not just for them, it's for you too. You need to meet other parents who are doing what you're doing so that you have a support network, and so do your kids. Well, I'm going to wrap that for now. That's just kind of a basic overview, and I will make more videos covering these individual spots and going more in depth on the different roles that you'll play as a homeschooler. But the basic idea is, yes, you can. I feel that you should. It's a great, great undertaking.